Today, we're diving into a really unique and complex interpretation of the 2024 Moscow concert hall attack. This comes from the Islamic scholar Shaikh Imran Hosein. And in his view, this tragedy isn't just some random event. No, he sees it as a critical move in a massive conflict, one with incredibly deep historical and even prophetic roots. So the big question is, who was really behind this? Now, the official reports, they told us who the gunmen were. But the source for this explainer, he's asking a totally different question. Who were the masterminds? He puts forward this theory that their real motive was something much bigger, way more strategic than what we saw in the news. And there it is. According to this view, the attack was a calculated hit job aimed squarely at a new relationship that was just starting to form. The whole point, he argues, was to poison the well, to make absolutely sure that a powerful new alliance between the Muslim world and Orthodox Russia could never, ever happen. But why? Why would that alliance be seen as such a threat? Well, to get that, the speaker says we have to look way back in time. He points to this really deep-seated historical conflict, suggesting this old grudge was deliberately dug up and used to find willing pawns for the attack. He uses a pretty strong word here, hypnotized. He's describing a certain mindset, an argument that a deep reverence for the old Ottoman Empire can create this sort of automatic hatred for its historical enemies. And this mindset, he claims, makes it super easy for masterminds to stir up feelings against Russia. And this number just says it all, doesn't it? The biggest historical rival of the Ottoman Empire was, you guessed it, Orthodox Russia. They fought a dozen different wars. That created this legacy of conflict that, according to the speaker, is still being used as a weapon today. Okay, so this is where things take a turn, from geopolitics into prophecy. The speaker connects all this tension to what he interprets as a Quranic prophecy. And he believes this prophecy actually lays out the entire grand strategy of the masterminds he thinks are pulling the strings. He centers his whole argument on this one specific verse from the Quran. And he's quick to point out that this is what's known as an ayah mutashabihat, which basically means it's a verse that's allegorical. You're not supposed to take it literally. You have to interpret it to understand its real meaning. And his interpretation is pretty wild. He says that shadow with 3 columns isn't about smoke at all. He equates it with the Dajjal. That's the Antichrist figure in Islamic eschatology. He argues it represents a 3-part master plan that's been unfolding throughout modern history. So he maps these 3 columns onto 3 different eras of world power. The first column, that was Pax Britannica, the age of the British Empire. The second, which he says was set up after the 2 world wars, is the world we're in now, Pax Americana, led by the US. But the third and final stage, the ultimate goal, is what he calls Pax Judaica, a new world order where Israel becomes the ruling state, taking over from the United States. And this right here is the punchline. This is how he connects the Moscow attack to this huge prophetic timeline. The claim is that the masterminds, who he alleges are acting for Israel, set up the attack to weaken Russia. Why? Because Russia is a major roadblock to their plan. So the attack was meant to speed up that transition from American power to this final world order. All right, let's shift gears to the event that the speaker believes was the immediate trigger for this whole thing. It wasn't a troop movement or some big political declaration. It was a conference, and more specifically, a private dinner in Moscow that he argues was a massive threat to the mastermind's plan. He describes being at this major conference, with people from 130 countries. But afterward, he was part of this very small group invited to a 2-hour private dinner with Foreign Minister Lavrov himself. And at that dinner, the conversation turned from just politics to theology. For the speaker, this question was just an incredible breakthrough. He saw it as a real, genuine invitation from the highest levels of the Russian government to build a bridge with the Islamic world, a bridge based on spiritual and prophetic understanding, with Russia's own destiny as a key focus. And the timing, in his view, is everything. He argues there's no way it's a coincidence that this horrific attack happened just a few weeks after that dinner. He presents this as the smoking gun. The attack was a direct, violent, and immediate response, meant to completely destroy the goodwill from that meeting and slam the door shut on any potential Islam-Orthodox Christian alliance. So all of this brings us to the speaker's really stark conclusion. He sees the Moscow attack not just as a reaction, but as a major escalation, one that confirms the world is heading down a very specific and very dangerous path. He's completely convinced that a great nuclear war is no longer a question of if, but when. He sees the attack in Moscow as another clear sign that the forces pushing for this Pax Judaica will do absolutely anything to achieve their goal. And that path, he warns, leads straight to a global war that could wipe out entire nations in minutes. So, based on this really apocalyptic forecast, he gives some very direct and urgent advice. It's time to perform hijra, which means migration. He's urging his followers to get out of Western nations, which he says are headed for destruction. He suggests either going back to their ancestral lands or, and this is really interesting, actually considering Russia as a safe place to go, precisely because it's standing against what he calls the forces of the Dajjal. He also makes some specific predictions. He warns that Turkey, because it's in NATO, will be on the front lines against Russia and will be one of the first countries to be attacked. And Pakistan, he says, is at a crossroads. Its fate depends on whether it stays allied with the West or has some kind of revolution and switches to Russia's side. So, at the end of the day, what are we left with? It's a worldview where a terrorist attack becomes a move in a cosmic chess game, where modern history is actually being guided by ancient prophecy, and where global alliances are being formed for a massive, inevitable war. It completely reframes a modern tragedy as just one more signpost on a very long road toward a prophesied and cataclysmic future.